I never pictured myself as the kind of guy who'd end up in a moment like this, staring at my phone in the middle of the night, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break through my ribs. The message on my screen blurred as I read it over and over, my brain struggling to process what I already knew would change everything. Brain, I don't know how to say this, but you need to see it for yourself. She's at Redwood Lounge. Not alone. My grip tightened around the phone. Redwood Lounge. I knew the place too well. It used to be our spot, the place where we laughed, talked for hours, and felt like we were still in sync before everything started unraveling. Before the distance grew, before she started drifting away. For a second, I thought about ignoring the message, telling myself it had to be some mistake, or maybe even a sick joke. But something deep in my gut, something raw and undeniable, wouldn't let me shake it off. So I grabbed my keys, feeling my pulse hammer against my ribs, and drove to the silent streets, my head spinning with memories, flashes of hushed phone calls, late nights with vague excuses, the slow, creeping realization that I had been doubting myself when I shouldn't have. But this wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was real, and I was about to face it. The moment I walked into the lounge, my eyes locked onto her. Samantha, my wife, the woman I had spent years loving, the person I had built a life with. And there she was, at the bar, laughing, not just laughing, leaning in, her fingers lightly grazing the forearm of some guy I had never seen before. He wore that smirk, the kind that said he already knew how this was going to play out. They weren't even trying to hide it. I stood frozen in place, my body stiff, my mind on fire. She threw her head back at something he said, her fingers brushing against his chest. That easy, familiar touch, the same one she hadn't given me in months. I could have walked up to them. I could have confronted her right there, demanded an explanation, made a scene. But I didn't. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and snapped a picture. None out of revenge. Not to use against her. Just to mark this moment, to burn it into my memory. Because I knew this was the moment everything changed. The moment I changed. I didn't say a word. I walked out before she had the chance to see me, before she could scramble for excuses, before she could try to spin it into something it wasn't. But the next morning, I waited. I sat at the dining table, staring at the cup of coffee in front of me, untouched, listening to the sound of her footsteps as she walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. She barely glanced at me. "Morning," she muttered, reaching for the coffee pot. My jaw tightened. Without a word, I slid my phone across the table toward her. At the same time, her own phone buzzed. She sighed, picked it up, glanced at the screen, and then looked at mine. The color drained from her face. She lifted her eyes to meet mine, but there was no guilt in them. No shame. Just annoyance. "You were spying on me," she said, flat and emotionless. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Spying? That's what you call it?" My voice was steadier than I expected. "I just wanted to see for myself what you've already decided behind my back." She exhaled dramatically, set her cup down, and rolled her eyes. "You're being ridiculous." The sheer audacity of it almost made me lose it. "I caught you with another man, Sam," I said, my voice disturbingly calm. "You were all over him, and now you're sitting here acting like I'm the problem?" She crossed her arms, looking at me like I was some overgrown child throwing a tantrum. "You don't own me, Mason." I went completely still. The way she said it, like I was some controlling, possessive husband, like I was the one in the wrong, it made my blood run cold. "I never said I did," I replied, my voice quieter now, deadlier. "But I thought we had respect. I thought we had something real." She let out a slow breath, shaking her head like I was some kind of fool. "You're overreacting," she muttered, brushing past me to grab her purse. She wasn't denying it. She wasn't even sorry. She was just done with the conversation. I followed her to the door, my hands trembling with barely contained rage. "What do you expect me to do, Sam?" My voice was barely above a whisper. She turned back, raising a perfectly sculpted brow. "I don't know," she said, smirking. "Be a man about it." Then she walked out. Like it was nothing. like I was nothing. I stood there for what felt like forever, staring at the empty space she had just left behind. And that's when it hit me. She wanted me to chase her. She wanted me to be furious, to fight for her, to prove how much I still cared. She expected the grand confrontation, the yelling, the desperate pleading. She wanted to feel wanted. Because in her mind, as long as I was fighting for her, she was winning. But what happens when the fight stops? What happens when the man she thought would never leave just disappears? I took a slow, deep breath, and I made my decision. She wanted me to chase her. Instead, I was going to make her feel my absence. And that was going to be the beginning of her regret. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. That's what she expected, what she wanted. But the more I thought about it, the more I saw what this really was. This wasn't about love. This wasn't about passion. This was about control. And I wasn't playing the game anymore. That morning, after she left, I took my time, finished my coffee, let it all settle in. The betrayal, the humiliation, the sheer disrespect. Then, I got up, grabbed my laptop, and started making plans. The first thing I did? I secured my money. Our bank account was technically joint, but let's be honest, I had been the one feeding it for years. She had her paycheck, sure, but we both knew who carried the financial weight in this marriage. Not anymore. I transferred my money into my personal account, leaving just enough behind so she wouldn't notice right away. I didn't want her catching on. Not yet. Next, I logged into all the bills, the rent, utilities, credit cards. Anything with my name tied to hers? I removed myself. She wanted independence? She was about to get it. Then, I dealt with the apartment. The lease was in both our names, but I had been the one paying for it. That was about to change. I picked up the phone, called the landlord, and let her know I was filing notice to move out. "You're breaking the lease early?" she asked, sounding surprised. "Yes." My voice was steady, firm. "Just tell me the penalties. I'll cover my ass." I wasn't trying to leave her drowning in legal trouble. That wasn't the goal. But I was going to make sure she felt what it meant to lose me. After that call, I moved through the apartment with quiet efficiency, packing up only what mattered. My clothes, my documents, the few things that actually held meaning to me. The rest? She can keep it. I didn't need reminders of a life that was already over. By the time I finished, the sun had dipped below the horizon. Still, not a single call. Not one message. She still thought she had me figured out, that I'd react the way she expected. She had no idea that by tonight, she had already lost me. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months. Moving through my routine, brushing my teeth, getting dressed, making breakfast, it all felt different. Freer. Except this time, I didn't make an extra cup of coffee. I didn't leave a note. I wasn't waiting for her to come home. I was already gone. I had booked a furnished place across town. Nothing special, just quiet, clean, somewhere I could breathe. I walked out before she even woke up, and I turned off my phone. I wanted to see how long it would take before she noticed. By noon, curiosity got the better of me. I powered my phone back on. 6 missed calls. A handful of texts. The first messages were casual, like she was just checking in, asking where I was, wondering if I had left early for work. One of them even had a pet name tacked on to the end, as if nothing had changed. I let them sit there, unread. I wasn't giving her the panic she was hoping for. I wanted her to feel this. By evening, I checked again. One voicemail. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. The first few seconds were just muffled background noise. Then her voice cut through, sharp and patient. "Nason? Seriously? Are you just going to ignore me all day?" A frustrated sigh. "Muck, I don't know what kind of tantrum you're throwing, but you need to stop acting weird. Call me back." I laughed. A tantrum. That's how she sighed. Not as the consequences of her own actions. Not as me taking back my dignity. Just some childish outburst. She still thought I was playing a game. That I'd come crawling back. That she still mattered to me. I deleted the voicemail. The next morning, No calls. By noon, more messages. Her patience was starting to crack. By the second day, the casual tone was gone. Her texts were shorter now, sharper. By the third, frustration seeped in. She wasn't just asking where I was anymore, she was demanding answers. Accusing me of being dramatic. Asking if I had actually moved out. By the fourth, the first real cracks appeared. Her messages weren't just annoyed anymore. They were uncertain. Stop ignoring me. This is ridiculous. And then, in the same breath, why are you doing this? She still didn't get it. She thought this was temporary. By day 5, desperation set in. Her messages came rapid fire. We need to talk. I don't understand. Just tell me what's happening. And there it was. Regret. She had spent days believing I'd come crawling back, trying to prove myself, fighting for her. Now, she was realizing I wasn't coming back at all. And that's when the calls started again. I let them ring. She needed to feel it. She had spent so long believing I'd always be there. That no matter what she did, I'd never leave. Now, she was starting to understand what it meant when I wasn't. And this was just the beginning. At first, she probably loved it. The space. The freedom. The thrill of doing whatever she wanted without worrying about me waiting at home. For those first few days, I imagined her laughing at my silence, rolling her eyes at my refusal to engage. She told herself I was sulking, that I was playing hard to get, that I was trying to punish her. She needed to believe that I still needed her more than she needed me, that I would break first, then I'd cave, that I'd come back. But then a week passed, then two, and reality crept in. That's when she finally understood something she had never considered before. I wasn't coming back. At first, the only thing that changed was the silence. No texts from me. No calls. No arguments. Just nothing. Then, the little inconveniences started adding up. The fridge? Emptier than usual. I had always been the one to do the grocery shopping, to keep the essentials stocked. Now, when she reached for something, she found nothing. The laundry? Piling up. I hadn't done all of it, but when I did mine, I usually handled some of hers too. Now, without me, it sat there. Then, the bills. That was the first real hit. She had never paid much attention to them. Sure, she had her own money. But I was the one who handled everything, made sure they were paid on time. The first overdue notice? She probably brushed it off. Then came the second. And the third. It wasn't until the internet got cut off that she really panicked. By then, 2 weeks had passed. And her messages? They had changed. The dismissive attitude was gone. No more telling me to stop being dramatic. No more, where are you? Now? When are you coming back? Not is. When? She had never imagined a world where I simply wasn't there. She had spent so much time believing I would always be there, that no matter what she did, I'd keep showing up. She had never once considered what would happen if I simply let go. And then, the cracks spread even further. That other guy, the one she had thrown our marriage away for? Dent spark? That's real? That's something different? Yeah, it was already fading. I had seen it coming, even before I caught her. She thought he was excitement, a break from the monotony, something new. But the thing about chasing a high? It never lasts. She was used to stability, used to the comfort I had provided, whether she had realized it or not. And now? She was trying to replace that comfort with a man who had never promised to give it to her in the first place. So he started pulling away, canceling plans, taking longer and longer to reply. And I knew she probably didn't understand why just yet. She had convinced herself that he was everything I wasn't. That's how it worked in her mind. The grass was always greener somewhere else. But now? Now she was spending more time alone than she ever expected. And that realization? It was starting to weigh on her. A full month passed before I finally heard her voice again. But it wasn't through a text. It wasn't a call. She showed up. I had been expecting it. I hadn't moved far, just enough to vanish from her daily routine, but not so far that she couldn't find me when she got desperate enough. And now she had. The knock at my door came one evening. Soft at first, hesitant, then firmer. I let her wait, let her stand out there, shifting on her feet, stewing in her nerves. Then, finally, I opened the door. There she was. Her hair wasn't as perfectly styled. There was tension in her jaw, a stiffness in her shoulders, something I had never seen before. For the first time in our entire relationship, she looked unsure. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words didn't come right away. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, waiting. She swallowed, cleared her throat. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. Just watched her. And there it was, the regret in her eyes. The slow, creeping realization that the life she ran toward wasn't as thrilling as she thought. That I wasn't there to clean up the mess. That the man she threw everything away for had never been a replacement, just a distraction. That she had gambled everything and lost. "Talk about what?" I finally said. Her lips parted slightly, then pressed together again. For a second, I thought she'd break. That she'd spill out a long-winded apology, tell me she had made a mistake. But she didn't, because she wasn't ready to say it. Not yet. Instead, she sighed. "You really just left?" I shrugged. "I thought that's what you wanted." She looked away, exhaling sharply. "I didn't think you'd actually." She stopped herself, shaking her head. "Never mind." I waited, but she didn't finish the thought. Because she had nothing to say. Nothing she could say. She thought showing up would make me crack. That seeing her, hearing her voice, would stir something inside me, make me want to fix things. She still believed she had that power over me. She didn't. And now? She knew it. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable. Then, finally, I spoke. "You should go." Her head snapped up. "What?" "I think we're done here." Her lips parted slightly, a flicker of shock crossing her face. She had come here expecting control, expecting something. Instead, she got nothing. Just the same emptiness she had left me with. And for the first time in weeks, I saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not defiance. Not anger. Regret. Real. Crushing. Regret. But it was too late. I stepped back and shut the door. For the first time, I felt free. She didn't leave right away. I stood on the other side, listening, waiting. And first, nothing. Then, the faint sound of shifting feet. A slow, deep breath. A hesitation. I could picture her standing there, staring at the closed door, trying to piece together how she had let things slip through her fingers. For the first time, she wasn't the one walking away. She had lost control. And I knew that realization burned like poison in her veins. Finally, after what felt like forever, I heard her footsteps fade down the hall. The soft click of her heels against the floor. The reluctant sound of her leaving. And just like that, she was gone again. But this time, it was different. This time, I was the one who left her behind. I expected silence after that. Thought maybe, just maybe, she'd accept it. I was wrong. A week later, she tried again. The text started slow. Careful. Tentative. Pay. I ignored it. A few hours later, "How have you been?" I let it sit unread. 2 days later, she finally tried something real. "I know I messed up. Can we just talk? Please." But last word, please. Not because I believed it was genuine, but because I knew she had never expected to say it to me. I can picture it. Her sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone, hesitating before pressing send, wrestling with the unfamiliar feeling of being the one on the other side of the silence. She had spent so long expecting me to fight for her, to chase her, to prove something. Now, she was the one waiting, and I wasn't answering. A few more days passed before she escalated. A call. I watched your name appear on my screen. Didn't molt. Let it ring. And ring. And ring. Then, silence. A minute later, a voicemail. I waited a few hours before listening to it. Her voice was different this time. Not cold. Not sharp. Just lost. "Nason, I don't even know what to say." A long pause. I miss you, okay? I miss us. I didn't realize how much until now. Another hesitation. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I don't know. I just wanted to talk. She sighed. For a second, I almost thought she was about to cry. But she didn't. Instead, she ended it with a whisper. Call me back. The message ended. I sat there, phone in hand, expression unreadable. And for a brief second, I felt something. Not hope, not sadness. Just the faintest, fleeting echo of what could have been. But it was gone before I could even grasp it. Because I knew better. This wasn't about love. This wasn't about realizing she had made a mistake. This was about regret. About sear. About losing something she thought was replaceable, only to find out it wasn't. She wanted me back. Not because she had changed, but because she missed what I had given her. And I wasn't that man anymore. She didn't stop trying. A few days later, I ran into someone, a mutual friend. Someone who had been around before everything fell apart. The moment they saw me, they hesitated. Give me a strange look. I already knew what they were about to say. She's not doing great. I shrugged. That's not my problem. I know, they said quickly. I think she regrets it. All of it. I let out a quiet laugh. Shook my head. Regret doesn't mean anything if you only feel it when it's too late. They didn't argue. They knew I was right. And I sank. Deep down, she knew it too. Another call. Another voicemail. This time, the desperation bled through. I just don't understand, Nathan. Her voice wavered, frustration curling around the edges. How can you just walk away like this? After everything? I could hear it bubbling beneath the surface, the anger, the disbelief. Because she still didn't get it. She still thought I owed her something. A conversation. An explanation. Closure. But she had made her choice long before I made mine. She had bet everything on the belief that I would always be there, that no matter how far she strayed, I'd be waiting when she turned back. Now, she was standing in the wreckage of her own decisions, looking around, realizing there was nothing left to salvage. And she hated it. Hated that I wasn't playing my part. Hated that I wasn't letting her rewrite the ending. Hated that she couldn't win me back. So, I didn't respond. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I had already said everything the night I walked away. And she had ignored it. Now, she'd have to live with the silence. Because that silence? That was my answer. The silence drove her mad. I could feel it in the way her messages became more erratic, more emotional, near wrath. She had started with arrogance, then confusion, then frustration. Now, she was unraveling. I ignored every call, every text. Each one was another desperate attempt to claw her way back into my life, to pull me into an argument, to force a reaction. She didn't want an apology. She wanted control. But I had stripped that from her. And without it, she was falling apart. 2 months. That's how long it took for her to truly break. At first, she put on a shell. Went out with friends, plastered on a smile, posted pictures like nothing had changed. Like she had won. Like she had moved on. But people talk. And soon, I started hearing things. She wasn't doing as well as she wanted the world to believe. Her finances were a disaster. She had underestimated just how much I had carried us. How much of her life had depended on my stability. She wasn't going out as much. She wasn't keeping up appearances. And worst of all, the man she had thrown everything away for? Gone. He had never wanted more than a thrill. And now that the excitement had worn off, he had disappeared. She had gambled her entire life on him. And she had lost. Then came the night I knew she had hit rock bottom. I had just gotten home from work, settling into the new life I had built. A life where I wasn't walking on eggshells. A life where I could breathe. Then, a knock at the door. I already knew who it was before I even stood up. For a second, I debated not answering, letting her wait, just like before. But some part of me wanted to see her. One last time. So, I opened the door. And there she was. She looked nothing like the woman who once stood in front of me, so full of arrogance, so sure of herself. Her makeup was uneven, like she had done it in a rush. Her clothes were nice, but thrown together without thought. Her hair was slightly messy, like she had been running her fingers through it too much. But her eyes? That's what told me everything. They weren't sharp anymore. They weren't full of pride. They were empty. She had spent so much time convincing herself she was fine, that she had made the right choice, that she had won. But now? Now she knew the truth. She had destroyed something she could never get back. She swallowed hard, shifting on her feet. Can I come in? No. The word left my mouth before I even had to think about it. She blinked, as if it had never even crossed her mind that I might say no. Like she still thought she could step back into my life with a conversation. She forced a small smile. Come on, Mason. Just for a minute. I shook my head. There's nothing left to say. Her smile wavered. The mask cracked. I miss you, she whispered. I miss us. And there it was. The confession she had been choking on. The regret that had been eating her alive. Months ago, maybe those words would have mattered. Maybe I would have let them in. But now? Now, they were empty. I leaned against the door frame, letting the silence stretch between us. She was waiting for me to crack, to let her back in, to give her the satisfaction of knowing she still mattered. Instead, I sighed. I don't think you miss me. Her brows furrowed. What? I shook my head. I think you miss what I gave you. The security, the stability, the certainty that no matter what you did, I'd always be there. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to argue. But she didn't, because she knew I was right. She had never missed me. She had missed the comfort of having me. And now that it was gone, she was lost. She let out a shaky breath. Can't we at least? No. I didn't let her finish. Because there was no at least. No second chance. No fixing what she had broken. Her eyes shimmered. Just for a second. Then, finally, she nodded. She took a step back, swallowed hard, gripped the strap of her purse like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Then, she turned and walked away. And this time, I didn't watch her go. I just closed the door. And I never looked back.